All right, thanks so much. So yeah, I wanted to start by just explaining what UX of EdTech is, and we'll jump into everything soon. So we're an organization that helps UX professionals who work on specifically products and services that support learning. That's our goal. And we have three main efforts here, and you'll kind of see these are clickable here. We've got a Slack community, a blog publication, and a podcast. And so all of those resources are there again to help UX professionals who work in this space. So definitely make sure to kind of bring those up in different tabs and check them out later. And then a great way to kind of keep tabs with what we're doing is LinkedIn. I would kind of recommend that social media source first. And then there's also a Twitter and Instagram account that we tend to share some resources as well. I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Imagine Learning, who's also my current employer. I wanted to give a shout out to a couple positions that are on the horizon, a product designer and UX researcher position for Imagine Learning. And just a quick shout out to the team there. We have amazing design managers and leadership that are really just pouring into the people that work there. The number one thing that I love about this is our design team. My role there has been supported, and I've been mentored, and I've been encouraged. It's just a great culture within the design team. And so just wanted to give a shout out to that you might want to keep an eye on the careers page for Imagine Learning. And then one more little shout out. You're going to hear a ton of tips today. And one tip that I wanted to give was about Figma. And so the tool that we're in right now is actually one of Figma's tools. We have an education community conference coming up. And I just wrote right here, learning how to use an industry-leading design tool while you're still in the classroom could be a win-win for both you and your students. Teaching your students through a really interactive platform. I mean, maybe even if this is your first time in FigJam, you might be thinking about ways that you could even use this in the classroom to facilitate some kind of discussion or activity. And then you're also learning something that's used professionally in the design industry. And so just wanted to give a shout out to that. If you wanted to pull the tab up to sign up for that conference that's coming up, it's all virtual and free next month. I'm going to kick it over to Christina. I did want to briefly mention that I'm also a former middle school science teacher of 5 years. And in my little sticky, I put a note here about some of my reflections on that experience and how I moved over into design. Happy to connect on LinkedIn and Twitter. And Christina, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to her because she's one of our community leads, and she's our event coordinator, and she's just done so much to make this event happen and a lot of other things behind the scenes. So I'm going to kick it over to her, and she's going to really host our time and kind of facilitate our questions today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia. And we've gotten a couple of requests to pause the music, so if we can do that for 1 second. And I'll get started once we get that off. Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. So hello, everybody. Super excited to meet you all. My name is Christina. And as Alicia mentioned, I'm currently working as the events coordinator here at UX of EdTech, also supporting as a community lead. I am currently working as a senior product designer at a company called Reputation. Unfortunately, not in EdTech, but EdTech is very near and dear to my heart because I was also a former teacher. So I taught 4th grade for 2 years, actually over here in the Bay Area. I want to say, I think it was like 2018 when I realized, maybe this isn't it for me long term. And so I was really looking for what else I could do with my life. And fortunately, at the time, I had a friend who was actually doing a boot camp all about UX. And so he was asking me to participate in his user interviews and studies. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, what's going on here? And so I actually ended up taking the summer to do that bootcamp myself, to learn more about this role and how to really dig deep in all of this very cool world that was very different than the educational world. And ever since then, I've actually had the fortune to be able to work as a product designer. So really excited. But yeah, we have some fantastic people joining us here today for the panel. We really wanted to provide some knowledge and some resources for all of you who are also hoping to make a similar jump. There is a lot of different types of opportunities out there. And so what was really important for us was just that we got some folks who kind of come from different roles and different backgrounds. So hopefully there's at least one of them that can resonate with you all, even if it's not exactly UX design. So starting off, we have Sarah, who is a fantastic UX writer over at BrainPop. She was a former principal and teacher for 17 years. She's actually also a community lead for our UX of EdTech community, and she's the one who runs our publications. If you've ever seen any of our articles, that's all supported by the lovely Sarah. We also have Zaniba, who is currently a UX researcher at Curriculum Associates, and she's also doing some UX writing work over at CrowdDoing. She was a former ELA teacher for about 15 years, so really awesome for that. We have Abby, who will be representing kind of the product, senior director of product at BrainPop, so more of the PM side of things. But previously, she was also an adjunct professor. Actually, she is currently an adjunct professor of UXD at NYU. She did teach elementary school as well for 4 years. Our last two are Jesse. So Jesse is currently a UX designer at Openfield. He was a former ESL and social studies teacher for 8 years. And last but not least, John is a product design manager at FanDuel, and is also currently a UX mentor at IDF as part of NYC, but was formerly a special education teacher for 13 years. So as you can see, we have a very diverse range of folks on our panel, and I'm super excited for you all to be able to hear about their journeys transitioning. And hopefully that helps gives you some insights on how you might make that change yourself. Before I go ahead and actually let them jump in, there's just a couple of things that I'd like to give you all a little reminder about. So in this Big Jam board, if you haven't yet, feel free to continue adding those stickies with your introductions so that you can connect with folks after this event. If you have any questions at all during this presentation, feel free to leave a sticky under the Q&A section. We actually received a lot of questions kind of beforehand, and so we took kind of the most popular questions to be part of our discussion today, but it is only an hour, so we can only fit in so many. So that's why you'll see there are some of the examples that we're kind of keeping our eyes on that have been provided in the past, but feel free to add your questions as we kind of go along here. And then, yeah, I think that covers it. Is there anything I'm missing, Alicia?
I think that's great. That's great. And I'll just reiterate with the questions again, if you could just read them over first, and then if you see something that isn't already represented, you have a really unique question, then maybe you could potentially add it. But yeah, I think we're ready to start.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and we've already introduced our lovely panel, but I would love for them to actually go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their own experience on how they transition from teaching to all of their various product roles. So with that being said, Abby, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
I would love to. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Abby, and as mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Product at BrainPop, working on a brand new consumer product, and I'm a UX design professor, adjunct professor at NYU. I may be, looking at my fellow panelists, I may be a bit unique from this group because I knew pretty quickly that teaching in the classroom teaching wasn't necessarily for me. So I taught 3rd grade in Chicago, I taught 4th grade in rural North Carolina, and I taught 7th grade math in Tennessee. And in between each of those teaching experiences, I was like, teaching isn't for me. Let me go try something else. So I worked for nonprofits, and I taught in the Peace Corps for 2 years. And when I came back, I reached the major catalyst for my transition out of teaching, and that was to get a graduate degree in digital media design for learning at NYU. And really the key to that was just a bunch of awesome internships at a bunch of awesome companies working in digital stuff for kids. So through those experiences, through those internships, I was able to get my true dream job at Toca Boca as their product lead and play designer, working on a super small team building a brand new thing within Toca Boca called Toca TV. And then I did a bunch of other stuff, but that's kind of the impetus for my first gig in tech. Excited to be here. Sarah, I think you're next.
Nice. Thank you, Abby. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Mondestin, and as you heard, I currently volunteer as the editorial lead for UX of EdTech. I'm also the UX writer for BrainPop. So I've been at BrainPop it'll be a year next month, actually. And I started as a community and content moderation manager. Do you remember that title, Abby? It's a mouthful, but I worked in product with Abby, and she was actually my first manager at BrainPop and taught me a ton about what it meant to work in product. So I officially transitioned to being the full-time UX writer as of last month. So I've held a few different positions, as many of us probably have in education. But I'll just tell you a few key roles. I started off as an English writing professor during grad school for a couple of years. And then I was a school principal in Monterey, California, and later a school principal in the Silicon Valley in California for a total of 11 years as a school principal. And I taught while I was also administrator. I taught language arts and I taught music. And I've taught every grade from pre-K to college. So just everything under the sun. But there was one particular night I remember when I had a really late board meeting, and I was 6 months pregnant, and I had an hour-long commute back home. And my husband told me, just sleep in your office. And I literally, I knew the day was coming where I was going to have to sleep in my office. And I had an air mattress. I was prepared. And I remember sleeping in my office, tired from being pregnant, not wanting to drive home because, that turnaround, you just have to drive back to school the next morning very early. And I remember thinking, this is not for me. I can't keep doing this. The health of my family, everything was really at stake. So it took a little while, but we decided to kind of step back. My family and I believe in prayer. So we really prayed about what our next moves were and started to goal set as a family. And we decided we needed to be in a place where we were going to grow, physically, financially, professionally, spiritually. And so after having my first and only daughter, we moved to Texas. I moved back into the classroom, taught high school English, taught university writing courses. But because I knew I wanted to transition out of the classroom soon, I decided to start my own writing and tutoring business and hired a few writers and other educators to work with me. And I contracted on the side, whatever that means, on the side with an EdTech curriculum company, all at the same time, doing all of those things just to kind of prepare for the transition. And I slowly started to shave off that excess work that really wasn't speaking to where I wanted to be. Ended up leaving the classroom and stepping into a beautiful role in EdTech with BrainPop. And it was a really progressive process that took some years, a lot of prayer, a lot of goal setting, a lot of family planning, and a very supportive husband. But I treated that first 6 months at BrainPop as my training ground. And it didn't stop when I got there, and just read a ton of books about product and design, met with so many people, and ended up transitioning within that year to a new role as UX writer. So yeah, hopefully that helps, but I too am happy to be here and happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I don't know who's next. Maybe you can.
Jesse, can go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for the invite. I'm also super excited to be here. My name is Jesse. I'm a UX designer at Openfield, which is a UX design agency focused on EdTech products. I started in education in 2013, also wide variety of roles, but primarily as a classroom teacher. Did my master's in teaching or instruction or curriculum design or whatever they call it now. They change the name every year. I was a middle school and high school social studies teacher and also taught English as a second language for adults. Leaving teaching was definitely the hardest decision of my professional career. I didn't think that, it felt like I was letting everybody down, but it kind of similar, Sarah, I knew that my health started taking a turn, my family life was taking a turn. The environment that I was in was very, very stressful with the school that I was at. And I knew that I could have an impact I felt like I could have an impact on education outside of the classroom. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I speak Portuguese, so I got a job managing I got a job in sales, managing a Brazilian territory. Hated it. It's a really long commute. The pay was horrible. But on the commute, I got to kind of learn about other careers. I found out what UX was, fell in love. I got fed up with the job. And in December of 2019, I quit my job, sold my house, and moved my wife and my cat into my mom's house and did a boot camp, a full-time UX boot camp. Felt like it was very similar in a lot of ways to teaching and curriculum design, and graduated in March of 2020, which was not the best time to be searching for a job. Took me 2 years to find a job, but don't get discouraged by my story. It was a long time, but there were a lot of other things that were happening that were kind of getting in the way. I got sick. I had to take care of a family member. But kind of everything fell into line, and I got an amazing job with an amazing company. I wanted to either work at a design agency or in EdTech, and I got into a design agency that works only in EdTech. So it was like, what? This is perfect. And I got to use my previous experience as a teacher, and I get to use it every day in the products that we're working on. So really excited for the transition.
Awesome.
And I also don't know who's after me.
No worries. That's
I'm
what I'm here
next.
for. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Zuniba, also known as Z. My story is basically, right now I'm a UX researcher at Curriculum Associates, and I've been in my role for about 2 months. And I started as an English teacher in New York City, and I taught grades 6 through 12, so middle school and high school. Most of my time was spent in high school. And I was also, besides being like a lead teacher, a mentor to new teachers, I also served as a training academy director for like new teachers coming into New York City. And I've always been passionate about, creating safe spaces and equitable learning experiences for underserved students. And similar to many of the people who already spoke, I came to a point in my life really during COVID, when we were teaching remotely and we were having a lot of time to really stop and reflect, when I realized that, it was time for me to get a better work-life balance. It was time for me to, really look into some of the things that I had been thinking about before. And that included, just like Jesse said, having a different type of impact on education. And so I had been trying to solve a problem of practice for me in education. And I came across actually the UX of EdTech. And I came across an article that I read, and it really got me interested in UX design. And so I started to do my own research. I really gravitated towards UX writing, and started doing a lot of research on that. I ended up doing a volunteer experience as a UX writer, and I was just exploring different parts of UX. And I ended up here at Curriculum Associates as a UX researcher. But I just wanted to add that, one of the biggest things with teachers is, teacher burnout. And I feel like as an English teacher, I was so dedicated to my job, but I was spending so much time like grading papers and lesson planning at home, and it really took away from my family time. And so I really needed to have that balance and still be able to be in the education field. And I'm happy that I made that switch.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then last but not least, we have John.
It's fine. Everybody just said my story, so we're good. We can move on to the next question. Hi, everybody. John Lewis, product design manager at FanDuel, formerly product design manager at Prudential. My story is very similar to the ladies and gentlemen that you just heard. I'm not going to spend too much time, but former special education teacher, Bronx, New York, also Westchester, New York. So I ran the gamut socioeconomically from the poorest economic area to the richest economic area. For me, it was, I didn't have the option. I was asked, I knew my contract was gonna be up. It was a 3-year contract. And I just honestly couldn't stomach the fact of sitting in another office interviewing for another special education job. I literally could just see myself getting physically ill, going, oh, I can't do this again. I just don't want to do it again. I had decided that that UX was the way to go. I had been doing some of the work for some companies privately, building websites using UX as sort of like a way to make extra money, because we get paid so much as teachers. So just figuring out how to make ends meet and doing things that way. And I just decided to pursue it full time. And what an amazing opportunity I was able to get. I went 2 months before the pandemic hit. I decided to take a boot camp. It was supposed to be a 6-month boot camp. I think I finished it in like three months, something like that. And then everything shuts down. There's no work. I legitimately just left a job that I was doing for 13 years, and it's a mentality change. It really is. It's really that grit mentality, that growth mindset, Dweckian mindset, if you want to call it that way. But just being 1% better every day, and thinking about just how am I going to do this, and putting the axe to the grindstone, if you will, and just treating it like a job. And I got a great opportunity with Prudential. Within 3 months, I was promoted to senior designer. 3 months after that, I was promoted to manager, and I was managing towards the end of my career there 15 designers, an outside agency, and researchers and writers as well. So it's very possible is what I like to do, and now what I do is very similar at FanDuel, and I like to mentor and give back and give other people opportunities that were given to me. But thanks.
Thanks, John. It was super awesome kind of hearing everybody's own stories, and it looks like a lot of folks in the chat are really resonating with all of your stories. What I'd like for us to kind of dive into next was a really popular question that we got, was just what skills do you find to be the most transferable from going from teaching to all of your prospective roles? And a lot of folks were interested in how can I tell my story when I'm actually job hunting, and how do my skill sets relate? And how can I really stand out, whether it's in the interview process or when I have a portfolio, and so on and so forth. So maybe Sarah, if you could speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. This is always, I get this question a lot too. It's really a tough question for me. I will say that I leaned heavily on my leadership skills and experience when looking for different positions, but I really didn't tell my career transition story, to be honest, in interviews or any correspondence in that way. I didn't focus on my transition. I really focused more on my progression as an educator, and tailored my profile, my resume. Everything was tailored as like this natural pivot from one place to the next. So I will, in all honesty, I didn't hide the fact that I was a teacher or a principal, but I realized the more I was in interviews and we talked about that and that came up, it seemed like that was not looked upon favorably. And so instead of me trying to change the system, and I realized I need to do this and I need to speak this language. So I knew I couldn't change the minds of hiring committees or interviewers, but I knew that I could change the way that I was perceived. And so I really started to work on, I hate using the word marketing yourself, but I did. I started to work on how I was going to market myself and how I was going to show people what my skills were without, saying all of that this was all, developed in the classroom, only because I realized that the rest of the world just doesn't get how super talented educators are and how many things we have to do. Not only do some people not quite understand it, they may not appreciate it when we say we had to do all these things. We're so organized because we had all these roles, and people don't normally get that in different arenas. So I just started to speak the language that was already out there. I used the lingo that I saw in applications and in job postings, and I really tailored my profile to that and made sure that I was linking with companies that resonated with me and resonated with my beliefs, my value system as much as I could. So that's really what I tried to do. And we have a ton of skills, but I did lean on my leadership skills, my management skills, and I leaned on the different jobs and roles that I had, whether it was teaching, being a principal, or outside of that, to show what those skills were in a very obvious way. I didn't want anyone to have to dig looking for my skills. I wanted to put them out there in a way that was a bit more obvious. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Was there another part of that question, Christina, that I missed?
It's kind of a 3-for-1, but I think a lot of people already kind of feel like that really resonated with them, and definitely the piece where it's like we as teachers know our own value, but others who haven't been in our roles before really don't know, right? So it's really on us for us to figure out how to translate that piece. So that was really awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I was just going to agree, like everybody knows what a teacher is, but very few people actually know what a teacher does. So the more you can go in and explain like, hey, this is what I actually did all the time. And I remember talking to Alicia kind of early on when I was transitioning to UX and thinking like, if I could do that, I could probably do anything. Like some of the things that you have to deal with as a teacher are insane. Like I've put fires out in my classroom, literally, and then like broken up fights and like then brought everybody back to the learning objective. So you're not going to have to do that when you get into UX. Like you'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And just kind of something else, the whole premise pretty much of UX is you're guiding a user through a path, through a journey, right? The premise of teaching is you're guiding a learner through a journey, through a path. So if you break it down really fundamentally, if you understand fundamentals of teaching, a lot of those fundamentals transfer over. Not all of them, but a lot of them transfer over. So you're already starting really far ahead of a lot of people that are transitioning into this field. And like I know it feels rough because it's like a new transition and you're going through it, but UX is kind of a new field and everybody in it is pretty used to people coming from other careers. So it's not like you don't have to go get a degree and spend 4 years and get a master's in order to get into this position. Like you can, there are a lot of people that are successful that are self-taught. I'm not saying that that's the route to go. It's kind of, that's more your discretion, but people understand that more than they maybe would if you were going into law or teaching.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I teach another class at NYU, I adjunct, and it's essentially how to get your first job in EdTech. And I think both of you two nailed it. And I think I obviously don't need to go too deeply into it with this crew, but just what Sarah said, like you are a designer. You should be thinking about every problem you can solve as a designer, right? So knowing the kinds of jobs that you're going to apply to, you should be able to like write your resume for that user in mind, right? Write your portfolio for that user in mind. So I think like get really meta about how you talk about your own experiences. I think to Sarah's point, especially for teachers, it's really important, especially if you're applying to EdTech roles, to be like teacher plus. So what is that plus? And think really critically about what it is for you. For me, it was my Peace Corps experience mainly. For Sarah, it was her entrepreneurial stuff, right? For you, it may be something else, but think about what that plus is. And it sucks to have to think about it because teaching is enough. But I think like, as you're looking at EdTech roles, be really critical. Like, you know, everyone here is in the same boat. How do you stand out? And I think on that note, not everyone here might go on to a role in UX, but it won't necessarily be in an EdTech company. So I think, and maybe some of my fellow panelists can talk about this, but one of the big things when I got my job at ESPN was like, oh, she was a teacher. And that's a cool and unique thing, right? So in any role you're looking at, like, oh, she's a product manager plus former teacher, and they saw the quality in that, you know?
Yeah, I'm going to jump right on that because I'm somebody who obviously former teacher. I started in insurance. I don't know if that's like exciting for anyone. It wasn't exciting for me. But it honestly was one of the coolest jobs I've ever had because it's so hard. The problems that you get are so hard to figure out. So you really have to dive deep into that content. Think about, making people enjoy death claims was really, really difficult for somebody to, for somebody to do. But it is your job as a teacher and as an educator to make students enjoy things that they're not going to want to do ultimately, right? So I found so many different levels of my teaching career that I do currently now in my everyday job. Another big thing is facilitation. If you can learn to facilitate a design sprint, it's absolute gold. And what did we do every single day, at least for me, for 13 years, was facilitate a design sprint, because you're walking other people who have different perceptions in life on different products, different things, whatever, and you're bringing them from point A to point B. It is the same thing with kindergartners as it is with CEOs. And in fact, a little side note, treat your CEOs like kindergartners. Whole lot of visuals, very little words on the page. Just to really sum up what I was trying to say is we as teachers have all of these soft skills that we bring to the table. It's about highlighting those soft skills in a way that you can say, hey, I was a former teacher, but I used to do all of this with technology. So, it's how you shine a light on the soft skills that you have when you're transitioning over.
Also, I wanted to add something about empathy and advocating for the user, because as teachers, we advocated for our students every day, right? We advocated for our students to principals, assistant principals, to everyone, right? And we advocated for what we knew our students needed. And so as a UX researcher and as a UX designer and as a UX fill in the blank, we advocate for the users. So the users are just like our students, especially in an EdTech company, the users are the students, right? And so the same way that you advocated for students in the classroom and in the school is the same way how you're going to be advocating for students in the UX world, especially if you're in EdTech. But if you're not in EdTech, then you're advocating for the users in the same way. And the last thing I wanted to add was just flexibility, being agile, being able to continue to work when you don't know what is going on, right? That whole thing about teaching and you have a coverage and you have this and you have all these things going on at the same time. It's the same thing in the UX world where things are up in the air and it's not exactly 100% sure. And you just have to be flexible, be ready to change directions at any time. It's the same concept in the UX world from my experience so far.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to remember that quote about treating your CEO like a kindergartner moving forward. But lots of great advice there. Thank you so much. Some things that a lot of people were interested about was also, I think as teachers, right, we all have that growth mindset of how can I improve myself? How can I make sure to really help myself out in transitioning? And so they were kind of curious to know, where do you find that there are the biggest gaps for those who are trying to change their careers? What are they really lacking when they enter the field? And maybe what are some ways that folks can actually try and help bridge that gap so that they really set themselves up for success here? Maybe Jesse, you can start us off for this one.
Yeah, so it's really hard to say, because the only thing that connects teaching is the fact that you're presenting information to a group of people. So you could be a UX teacher getting into UX. So that's going to be very different than a middle school social studies teacher. So I think really figuring out where your skills are and where they lack, finding, I guess my recommendation would be doing kind of a skill inventory. So finding a curriculum for a UX design bootcamp or something on LinkedIn Learning or something like that, and just go through the modules and say, okay, can I do this? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and figure out where you're lacking, because where I was lacking may be significantly different than where somebody else was. I think it's really important to get basics down first. And just, I can't really speak for products, so I'm going to speak solely for UX here, but basics of graphic design are really important. It doesn't matter if you're a researcher or a designer, you're still going to be making recommendations based on pages. So if you can understand those basics, that's important. Basics of research, still important, because even as a designer, you're probably going to be benchmarking. You're probably going to be doing other things. And then basics of product, like what is a product lifecycle? How does product work? How do you hand things off to engineering? Like, there's a lot of very basic UX principles, but figuring out where that lack is for you, again, I'm sorry, because I don't have a good answer. The one thing that I would say that definitely held me back, I knew that I was lacking in graphic design because I'd never done it before, but that's easy enough to learn. You can go do a bunch of courses on that. But the way that I told my story in my portfolio, and the way that I told a story and walked mostly hiring managers through the portfolio without me being there, because I knew, like John said, I've been facilitating for the last 7 years or something. Like, I can tell somebody how this thing works, but writing it was completely different. So once I figured out how to write copy, I got a job much, much faster, because it was important for me to explain the design decisions that I was making. And that's true after you get into a company, and especially true while you're looking for a company, because they're going to be looking why you made the decisions that you made. So very broad, but that's about as good of advice as I could give.
I think sorry to jump in. I think the number one thing that I see, which is totally understandable, is just like a lack of experience on a product team, right? So like, as a product manager, obviously you need to know how product works, right? And I think like my mom doesn't know how product works. Most people who don't work in tech don't understand what product management is. Perhaps some people in this room don't understand what product management is or how the product development cycle works. And any position you have in EdTech, you will have to be abruptly clear on all of the steps of that process and who's involved in it. And so that's the biggest gap that I see in applicants, especially teacher applicants, is like, I need to see proof that you like can go into a product meeting and understand what this meeting is for and those sorts of things. So not saying that can't be done in a boot camp or that can't be done in a book, but like actual experience building products for people. And then my thing about hiring product managers is you have to have been involved and like shipped a real product to a real person. And when I say real product, like it can be a boot camp project, but there needs to be some like it is for a real user and has gone out into the world. And so at least in terms of product, that's usually like the bare minimum for hiring product people, which of course is like really hard to get that experience. It sounds like boot camps are making partnerships and doing a lot of those things so that people can get that experience. I realize that that's tough and hard to hear, but I think like for product management, it really is like, how do you run through that process? And then the second thing that I would say, which is a little shocking for teachers, but really like critically looking at data is a really important skill across all roles on a product team, I think. And for some teachers, it's, different than others, but I think like looking at all sorts of behavioral data and making assumptions about it is a thing that sometimes I see lacking.
I just want to add one thing to what Abigail said. I'm going to be really quick. Just what she said about the experience is the same thing that I was going to say. And I think that my experience doing the volunteer position really helped me to solve that problem, because as I was interviewing, they were saying, you don't have enough experience in UX. Like, what experience do you have actually doing UX? And so once I got the volunteer position and I was in a UX writing role and I was working with product teams and I was working with cross-functional teams, I was actually getting that experience. And so I was able to really truly understand what the role was that I was going to be in. And so if you can get a volunteer position, if you can afford to volunteer a couple hours a week, part-time or something, I think it'll be very beneficial, because you're going to get that experience that you're going to need to, speak about in interviews and really even see if that's really the role that you want to go into.
Yeah, I would plus one to all of that. One thing, I mean, I look at resumes every day, all day long. UX designers and UX researchers and content design. And process is key. Like, I cannot stress this enough. If you don't understand what a design process is, I won't look at your resume. I won't look at your portfolio. If you can't walk me through the double diamond, the 5 steps, whatever UX process you want to use, find it, learn it, love it, practice it every single day. I mean, there's designers that I work with and have worked with that don't necessarily fully understand the design process yet. But it is so key to understand the process that you're going to be doing every single day. You need to know where you are in the process, where you are in the life cycle, and understanding what your role is and your responsibility is within that process. And on Z's point, just quickly, learn a website tool, learn Webflow, learn what else? I did, it was one of the oldest ones out there. I can't even remember. I don't do it anymore, but learning a website tool is fantastic. Build a website for your classroom, build a website for the school, you build a website for somebody who works for the school, whatever, and then use your UX process through that. That is, it was something that taught me process, and it taught me visual design, and it taught me how to work with a client. So which is another really important thing to understand as well. But those are really those are pieces of advice I wish I had when I was transitioning as well.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, John, that's really good advice. And I'm the queen of double dipping. So like you're saying, when you don't have all the time that, I don't have time to read a bunch of books and go to boot camp and do all this. I'm teaching in the fall, use your classroom. As we all probably have, we want to learn something, we're going to teach it. And you teach what you need to get the experience, go on a journey with your students, create programs at your school, take on projects in places where you see help may be needed, reach out to them, reach out to companies, businesses, people you may know, and gain that experience however you possibly can. I think that's a good avenue.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Hopefully you all found that really useful and helps you identify different ways that you can go ahead and help level yourself up. For our last question, it would just be, what final advice do you have to those who are transitioning into the field? And we are running a little short on time, so if you just maybe have like one golden nugget that you would share with everybody to take away, that would be fantastic. But Zuniba, do you want to go ahead and start us off for this one?
Okay, so since I only get to pick one, I will say that really try to be yourself when you interview, and let the hiring manager know who you are as a person, let them see the human side of you. I feel like I struggled with that in the very beginning when I was interviewing, and I was just way too stiff and just like not my real self. And I feel like over time, as I interviewed more and more, I got to really shine as, as Zuniba, as who I really was, the educator, the leader, and all those other things. And I feel like, a company wants you because, you can do the job, but also because they want to work with a human that they actually like. So I would say just try your best to be yourself and let them see who you really are, and smile and do all those kind of things.
I'll go next. I think for those of you who are eagerly anticipating that next role, I think you should apply to everything that you think you might want to do. I see so many students, and generally women, who look through a list of requirements in a job listing, and they say, oh, I'm not sure I could do this thing or this thing. And that is closing a door before anyone closes it for you. And these are all real opportunities. So I know it is a little bit of upfront work, but make applying for jobs your second job. I think if you think you might want to do it, go for it. A lot of those doors won't open, and that's okay, right? You don't have to put all this emotional energy into each application. And later, if you decide it's not the gig for you, you can shut that door yourself. But you having the ownership and the autonomy to decide which you want can only happen if you apply for all of the things that you think you might be interested in doing. So really just be confident. You are a designer. You can do these jobs that perhaps you're missing one or two things. Please go for it, please.
can share just really quick. One of the things that really worked for me, and this is not to say that it worked for everybody or is necessary for everybody. I was full-time job searching, and it's a really like hard process. You feel really isolated in doing it, or at least I did. And what kind of got me out of a rut was actually finding a mentor, paying for a mentor so that they're kind of they're responsible to be there. And what was it? I think I used Mentor Cruise or ADP List. And this might not be the first step if you're doing a transition, but if you're already there, you're just trying to get that, you're trying to get the home base, like paying for a mentor and like being accountable every week to produce something, it really, really helped me figure out where I wanted to go, how I was going to tell my story, and like kind of wrap up my portfolio, which is, it's a beast, but yeah, that really, really helped me get towards the end.
I like that too, that crafting your story and telling your story, I think is so important. Once you apply for all those jobs and you do have that power to close doors when you need to, and linking up with other people, mentors who may be in positions that you're interested in, or just people that can help you get through a really tough time, understanding what your story is and being able to speak to that, I think is important. Tell a story that includes the things that you think or hiring managers want to know about. They want to know about your organization skills. They want to know about how you make tough decisions, your professionalism, all of that. Start crafting a story and make that your story, and just tweak and tailor that to different positions. But once you have that story, that's like your own elevator pitch, and keep that and build on it. People love stories. So think about that.
Yeah, I think for me, there's two things, right? During the job search, it does get grueling. It's a grind. It legitimately is, and I treated it very much like a job. But there's times where you do have some free time, if you will, and always be learning something new, and always practice your skills. Right. Like I think Jesse had said this, I was not a natural visual designer, and I was not very good in the beginning. So I designed something every day, one thing every day, that whether it was a homepage for Spotify, if it was, a website, whatever it was, design something every day. If that's your weak point, if it's research something every day. But constantly work on your practice, constantly work on your craft. As teachers, we were always asked to consistently work on our craft. In UX, it's no different. So get into that process. Continue to read, continue to research, continue to look at new and trending designs on Dribbble or wherever. But always be learning something. Always push yourself. Always push your brain. Because there's going to be those lapses in time where you're not going to hear back from your recruiter. You're not going to hear back from the company that you just applied for. And, instead of sitting there twiddling your thumbs, you could be doing something to better yourself. So that's my advice.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of great advice from all of our great panelists here. We do have a couple of minutes left, so maybe we can take one question from the audience. Alicia, was there one that you noticed on the big Jamboard that would be a good candidate for that?
Sure. Let me read this off real quick. So there's one that says, how have teachers discreetly networked on LinkedIn? They gave the example of my head of school / the board would not be happy if it was visible that I was looking to transition out of teaching. It would make me look like I'm not 100% committed to teaching or don't love teaching at my school. Even vaguely updating my LinkedIn profile to not be teaching centric made me nervous, or commenting on UX related posts. I was wondering if anyone had thoughts in response to that one.
I can respond. If you're serious about transitioning, be serious about transitioning your profile, because first of all, it's a social profile, right? What you do outside of work is what you do outside of work. If you're seriously thinking about transitioning, your LinkedIn is one of your biggest tools to helping you. So there's somebody just said it in the chat, don't block your own blessings. That's 100% correct, right? Like if you want something so bad that you have to put it out there in the world, and it'll become the thing that you want. So worrying about what other people think and what other people say, you're going to stay in the same spot, or wherever you go. So, take that mindset and go, if this is something I want, then, maybe transitioning your LinkedIn profile will help get that engine started.
And something, Sarah, I think you said, like, bring it into the classroom. If it's at all possible, like, maybe you could be teaching this, and that's a benefit to everybody. And then they might support you in doing more stuff on LinkedIn regarding UX and learning more.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I guess my only thing is like, be bold, and like all of these what if that, like everyone said, is going to hold you back, right? What if I apply and no one calls me back? Then the world goes on. What if I start liking UX things and my principal knows what's up? That could be a good thing, right? Like things could change, or like you could be asked to do things in your classroom that relate to what you're studying, right? Like I think what ifs are just like barriers to yourself. So be bold and know your own value, and ask for the things that you want. And often that is through LinkedIn. So I would just say, like, do it.
Yeah, I plus one to that, and definitely keep in mind, as we all know, that there are people looking at what you're doing and what you're posting. You don't have to post it all. You don't have to say you don't have to post publicly to everyone about what you're thinking of doing. But it's definitely, linking with people privately is fine, and sharing your experience with UX in the classroom, or highlighting some things that you've done. I've seen teachers very slickly and slyly like making comments on different ed tech companies and things that they like about them, and tagging them in that, but still saying, I'm still a teacher and I'm going back in the fall, but understanding that they're open. This is your LinkedIn profile. Your principal does not own your profile. That ain't got nothing to do with them. That this is you and it's your journey. And I'm still on LinkedIn every day, and I have a job that I love. So if you're constantly on and it's a normal thing and part of your process, no one should have any issue with that. And if they do that's an issue in itself. But definitely continue updating your profile and making those comments. But again, you don't have to spill it all.
I'm just going to quickly jump in there and just echo what Sarah said. And I was reflecting backwards, and those months where I was in the middle of both, I think my profile said something like educator and UX designer. It was just both. And that's true to the point of what everyone's been saying, that you're designing learning experiences, learning experience design, even, and instructional design was something I leaned into early to try to figure out what that meant. And there could be some room there for overlap. It's like, as you're growing as a experienced designer, that's going to directly enhance your ability to facilitate in the classroom. There's so many things I wish I knew now, that I know now, that I wish I knew as a teacher. And I think Jesse mentioned it too. It could be that you're even leading out like some design thinking type workshops with your students. One of the last things I did the summer before I was done teaching was lead out middle school UX design workshop for 3 weeks. And it was super fun. And my principal loved it, and there was a lot of support there. So finding those ways to cross over. I know there's a lot in our community that would love to chat about that further. So I'll ping it to you, Christina, but I wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. So unfortunately, we are almost at the end of our event. So that's kind of all the time we have today for questions. But I do really want to encourage you all. I do see a lot of great questions, both in the chat and also in the Figma. There are a lot of folks besides those who have been on this panel today who have made that exact same transition. So definitely like reach out and find these folks on LinkedIn, or you can join our Slack community on that left-hand side there. If you select right on the left, you're able to join our community community. So just fill out the application, and there are a lot of people who would be willing to offer advice and speak on anything that's kind of on your mind. It's a really awesome group of people in there. So definitely utilize these resources and this opportunity to connect with those who have done exactly what you're hoping to do here. One other thing is down at the bottom, if you have some time today, we'd love to get some feedback and kind of understand what was your biggest takeaway from this presentation. I know I personally heard a lot of awesome advice, and so if you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free to do so. This Big Jam should be available at least until the end of the day to be edited and whatnot. So feel free whenever you have the time, go ahead and add that in. And just one last piece, this was recorded. We will be sharing this out both on LinkedIn and Slack as well later on. So if you're interested in kind of reviewing this one more time, it'll definitely be available. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for all of your time and for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we really hope that you found this useful.
Good luck, y'all.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, panel. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.